On Her Best Fucking Life, we have Staci Hissong, who I have actually had the pleasure of being a former coworker of, and I've actually known her for like almost 10 years now. But Staci and I are going to talk about some very serious stuff today. She's had some life experience on something that we can both relate to, and I think her story can give you guys a lot of insight and help a lot of people that maybe are going through something similar or have gone through something similar. So I'm really excited to have Staci here today, but I'm going to let her go ahead and introduce herself next. So hi, Staci. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So my name is Staci Hissong. I'm a positive mindset and life coach. I help ambitious women to reach their full potential through confidence and basically just getting out of their own damn way. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I think it's going to be a really good topic. I think it's important to hear about the other side of addiction, which is kind of what we're talking about today. So I'm kind of excited.
I'm excited too. So the reason I wanted Staci to be my first guest on Her Best Fucking Life when I started taking people on to interview was because since my sobriety story has been a big focus of all of the things and all of the content I've put out, I know that Staci has had a firsthand account of experiencing what it's like to love an addict and also unfortunately lose an addict. And I felt like this was something that was going to be so helpful for a lot of women and men out there that maybe are going through a similar situation. And so I knew she was the first one I had to have on here. So Staci, I am so excited to have you on, and I thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable and talking about such a sensitive subject with us, because I know it's not easy.
No.
But I'm gonna go ahead.
Yeah, definitely not easy, but I think it's important. I went through all of that bullshit so that I can help other people and let other people know that they're not alone and not feel as judged, because it's really, I mean, as difficult as the addiction side is, it's really hard to be on the other side because you get judgment all over the place as well. So
Absolutely. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about how that relationship started?
okay. So in September of 2013, I was actually just out with some girlfriends at a bar watching the Michigan State game. And I was sitting at the bar and this guy came up behind me and he like yelled over top of me to order a drink. And I turned around, being the girl I am, turned around and was like, that was fucking rude. And, it just kind of spun from there, and we started a relationship. We dated on and off for 3 years, and unfortunately he lost his life last April, so April of 2017.
Sad.
Yes,
Unfortunate.
definitely. So when I met him, his addiction was actually to what I thought was just to painkillers and to downers, so like Xanax. And I helped him kick that habit. I thought, like, I went through the whole process of withdrawal with him, which for those of you who've been in withdrawal or have had people in your life go through withdrawal is a really ugly thing. But then I found out, so that all took place within, I think, probably the first 4 months of our relationship. So our relationship was very, very fast, which those of you who know me know that is like not how I do things. So it was insane, the connection that we had and the quickness with it. And then literally the problems that came right afterwards. And then I found out he like lost his job in January, found out he was stealing from me in February. In March, found out that he broke into a friend's house. And then that's when it all came out that it was actually heroin and not just painkillers.
Yeah, and I feel like that happens so often when someone suffers from one addiction, it kind of piggybacks and leads into addictions with other substances. That's extremely common for that to happen. So I want to ask you, was it obvious from the beginning, from day one? Were you aware of these addictions when you got into it?
So I thought, like, now I've done the whole, let me go back and see the red flags. Like, let me see, I'm a licensed professional counselor, so I'm trained in red flags. That's like my life. So for me, the fact that I missed it was almost shameful to me, because I'm like, absolutely not. Like, how the hell did I miss that I was living with a heroin addict? Like, how did I miss that? And I look back and there were some things that were like a little questionable at the beginning. just like little stupid things that you can just chalk up to a new relationship, or, you know, like I would misplace something, but really he stole it. But to me, I'm like so absent-minded. I live by myself now and misplace shit. So like it was all things that I could have logical answers to. So I didn't really see it. It wasn't until a month into our relationship, I actually came home and he was supposed to be here and he wasn't. And he had left me this big long letter about how he couldn't be with me because I deserved so much better and all this stuff. And he wasn't answering my calls. So I eventually called one of his friends and they told me that he had an addiction problem. And then a couple days went by and my boyfriend called me and explained the whole situation. But again, only explaining it as pills, saying that there was heroin in his past, but he had been to rehab and that it was no longer an issue, which I wish I would have done the research on heroin then to learn that only 3 to 10% of people actually recover from heroin.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a frighteningly low percentage.
Yep.
So I want to ask you, when you were in this beginning of the relationship, when you started, you know, my next question was actually going to be, were there any red flags? Were there any signs? So you answered that, but was there any point where you thought I should go or I should leave this situation?
Oh yeah. All the time. All the fucking time. Like, let's just be honest.
Right.
I had dated a gambling addict previously in my life. And, you know, I dated a lot of pieces of shit pretty much. And the thing that kept me with him is how much he loved me. Like, it was a different love than I can explain. And what I tell people now when I explain my relationship with him is I explain it was a perfect relationship minus heroin. It's just a really big minus. Like, it was a huge thing. So, yeah, there were times, when I found out that he was back on the pills after we went through the withdrawal and went through all of that. And I found out how much money he was spending and basically living with me for free. And, all of the things I kicked him out, which really turned into me feeling sorry for him because he had no other place to go and him moving into my spare room. So within five months of us being together, we were sleeping in separate rooms.
Wow.
So yeah, there were
it did go there.
there were definite signs and knowings of me knowing that I needed something different, but there was that part of me being a counselor, being, you know, a social worker, being a therapist, doing all those things that was like, but I need to be there for him. I need to help him. I love him so much. I know he loves me. I know it's the drugs. It was always giving, finding the value that he gave overweighing the addiction.
Did you feel like you could have fixed him? Is that what you think you were trying to do?
I'm sure. But I wasn't trying to be his therapist or counselor. I actually paid for him to go to therapy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, because he didn't have insurance, and I paid out of pocket for him to go to therapy because I didn't want to be his therapist. I wanted to be his girlfriend. Right. But I knew he needed more help than what I could give him. And so I tried to help, but yeah, I think part of it was this love is so much, he has to be able to get out of this. He loves me so much. I have to be enough for him to give it up.
Right. You feel like the love between the two of you is strong enough that it should be enough to outweigh the addiction. Absolutely. And I think that's what is so hard for people that get into this situation. You know, I've been in similar situations and it's like, how am I not enough? Like, how is what we have not enough that you're willing to throw it all away for something like, you know, pills or alcohol? And, you know, sometimes when people aren't familiar with addiction, they can't fathom in their head, like, how that's possible when that's really how their minds work when they're stuck in that situation.
Well, and, you know, so I used to work in foster care, and a lot of people that I worked with, they had lost their kids because of addiction. Right. And when they would go back to their kids and they'd relapse, or when their kids would go back or they relapse and all of those things, people would say, I don't understand how they can choose the alcohol or the drugs over their kids. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's so crazy. But then being in it, it's so different. It is such a different feeling because they weren't making that choice. Yes, they made the choice to pick it up the first time, but after that, they lost that choice. It was no longer a choice. It's something so much deeper. And it, you know, coming from the mental health field, I had learned so much, and that almost like gave him more excuse from me, because I understood that. I understood that part of addiction, that I was like, this isn't him. This isn't who he is. He doesn't steal. He doesn't do drugs. Like, he doesn't, go missing for days. The drugs make him do that. And it put me in a really, really fucked up place in my own life.
Right. So it sounds like the knowledge you had more so about addiction from your line of work almost made you sympathize to him a little bit and
Yeah.
stay in it and be like, well, it's, he's sick. It's not him. So how long did this cycle continue? How long did you guys continue to be in a relationship together?
Over 3 years.
Okay. So, I mean, that's a really long time. And I'm
Well,
assuming there was a lot of ups and downs and a lot of shit that happened.
yeah. I mean, you saw some of it firsthand. Yeah, you got to see some of it. Yeah, so within 6 months, he was back on heroin, broke into a friend's house, went to jail. I actually went out to his car to see when his friend called me if the stuff was out there, and it was. So I actually took it back. Like, police were in my home. Like, I was being interviewed. Like, it was just such a mess.
Wow.
So yeah, he went to jail within the first 6 months. He was there for 3 and got out. And during the time he was in jail, he was calling me, and I was taking the call sometimes, but not always. And then I finally got to a point where I'm like, I'm not taking the call anymore. I can't do this. He would send me letters, but I wasn't writing back. And after 3 months, he got out, and, he contacted me once he got a phone and all of those things. And I decided that I did want to see him because I still had all this love for him, but I was just seeing him as a friend. And that lasted for about a minute and a half.
Right. Old feelings die hard. There you go.
Well, and I'm not going to lie, like, prison also, like, did a real good number on his body. Like, I'm not even going to lie about it. He was
looking good. Okay.
Yeah, he was real pretty when he came out of prison. So he was in jail that time. So he ended up in prison later on. But yeah, I mean, there was a jail sentence, a prison sentence, there was rehab, there was an overdose where he ended up in the hospital. And because I didn't have a relationship with his family, I didn't know where he was. He went missing in my life. And that happened several times throughout the 3 years. I tried to date other people, and none of them were him. Like I said, it was a perfect relationship besides the heroin. It was just the heroin that was the problem. So no one else was ever him. And it got to a point where he disappeared again after 3 years. And during that time, I met somebody and started a relationship, and it was going really well. And when he got out of rehab that time, he messaged me and tried to really just wanted me to know what happened and all of those things. And I told him I couldn't do it again because I would accept whatever he told me. Right. And sadly enough, that was the last conversation we ever had. And he overdosed 4 months later.
So while he was in there, when he got out, what do you think was the final, like, straw that broke the horse's back, the breaking point, the I'm done moment, where when he reached out, like, what was it that made you ready to say, like, no, I'm not doing this again?
So I think that there were 2 things. One, I learned that I could have strong feelings for somebody else. Because a huge part of me, like, romanticized the relationship almost. I had always been in fucked up relationships, so this wasn't really anything new. It was just scarier than all the other stuff, like, because death was always imminent. So that was one. The other thing for me is I was so open and accepting of what was going on with him and in his life that when stuff started to go south and he got back, as far as I still don't know at the end, like that last time that he went missing, I'm not sure if he got back into drugs. I just know he was drinking really heavily. And I think that's what sent him back into rehab, because he saw himself spiraling. But again, I didn't take the call, so I don't really know the whole thing. But for me, it was the fact that he didn't tell me that that's where he was at, because I was so open and honest and accepting of everything. I understood that he was embarrassed, but to me, it was the selfishness of it. Just, I couldn't take it again. I couldn't go through that again. Right. And unfortunately, that's what an addict is. Like, that's all they can think about.
So when he overdosed, when he passed away, tell me about what that felt like for you, because I want to know, were you feeling regret? Did you blame yourself? Were you feeling guilty? What were like the things running through your head when you first found out that he had ultimately overdosed and lost his life?
Yeah. So this part I might cry at. Just
That's fine. If you need to cry, cry.
Yeah.
I know this is a lot.
Um, so I no longer had any contact with him. He was blocked on all my social media. And it wasn't because I didn't want to know. It was because I knew if I knew things that I would get sucked back in. Even I was in a healthy relationship, I was in a happy relationship, but I knew that I would allow him back into my life in some capacity. And because the love I felt for him was stronger than anything I'd ever felt before, I was scared that I would let that overpower everything else. So he was blocked on all social media. I didn't answer any block calls, any numbers I didn't know. I had no contact with him. So actually what happened was we had a mutual friend, and she called another one of our mutual friends, and one of my best friends, and was like, yo, like, I just saw this on Facebook. And she's like, do I text her? And my best friend was like, no, I'll go to her house and tell her, like, you cannot text this to her. You don't know what she's going to do. And the same week that I found out, my current boyfriend was deployed. So I was already like an emotional wreck that week.
Yeah.
So I was getting ready to go get my hair done. My friend like showed up at my house, and she's like, I need you to sit down. And I was like, I don't have time to sit down. I have to leave. And she's like, no, I got to tell you something. I'm like, you're being really weird. Like, what is it? And she said, Jeff's dead. Like, just plain and simple. And I just like looked at her, and I remember like blinking a few times and saying, okay, I got to go get my hair done. And she's like,
wow.
yeah. And she was like, no, like, I need you to hear this. I need it to resonate with you. I need you to hear what I'm saying. I heard you. He's dead. And she had told me that he overdosed. And she's like, I need to know that you're okay. And yeah, I'm fine. I honestly don't think I cried about it for a week. Like, it was just, part of it was shock. The other part was I didn't want to feel that emotion.
You were blocking it out.
100%. I don't really think I allowed myself to feel it until the relationship I was in actually ended. We just broke up this past May. So it was almost a year before I think I fully allowed myself to really feel it, because I think that it was a hard place to be, because I was in a new relationship and I didn't want to like muddy the waters or make it seem like I wasn't in love with this person that I was. But and he was understanding. I talked to him about it, but I couldn't fall apart because I didn't want it to seem like I was still stuck in this past life. So yeah, I mean, I went I would say a good week before I really like cried about it. And then really dealing with it, I went probably about a year. And yeah, there's definitely, I feel some blame for it, in the fact that if I would have said, yes, I can talk to you, I can hear this story, would this not have happened? But then my more logical side really kicks in and says, no, like, this is addiction. I was always waiting for it. Like I said, it was when he was in jail or prison, I was a happier person because I knew he'd be fine.
You knew he was safe when he was in prison.
So it was always this imminent thing. And then I think about, if him and I still would have been together, I would have lost my fucking mind. Like, I would have lost it. When he went to jail that first time, I got put on FMLA. I was off work for 6 weeks, like 6 weeks unpaid leave they gave me because I was a mess. I was dealing with somebody else's addiction, but they were like drugging me up because it's the only way I could get through the day. Like, I could not function. I was a disaster when that happened. And that was just him going to prison and finding out about the addiction, let alone him actually dying. So yeah, I mean, there was some feel of ownership. Like, I felt a little responsible, but at the end of the day, I know I'm not. It's a lot. Therapy and coaching, definitely.
Exactly. Yeah. But I'm glad you understand that, though, because I feel like a lot of women in the situation, or men, or vice versa, would get stuck in that cycle of thinking they could have changed something, or they could have done something to make it happen different, or, you know, maybe they could have been there one more time to fix it. And, you know, I think it's really important to hear you say, like, you understood that it wasn't your fault, and that,
Yeah.
you know, if you were with him, like, it might have still happened the exact same way, and knowing that maybe you wouldn't have made a difference in that situation. So I think I'm glad to hear that you feel that way, because I think a lot of people would get stuck in that and be like, oh gosh, I could have done something, I could have saved them. When
Yeah.
ultimately in addiction, you know, that doesn't always happen.
Right. And I think that that's a pretty normal feeling to have, just because if you were in the relationship and you felt like you were the only one that was helping at the time, it also becomes super codependent, right? Like, I
Right.
needed him as much as he needed me. So, it wasn't healthy. And a lot of it was, I spent 3 years. Like, I didn't just try for a minute to help. I spent a lot of money. I lost a lot of things. I lost a lot of myself in that relationship. I spent 3 years going back and forth with this. So I knew, I literally poured my blood, sweat, and tears into it. Like, that is a literal statement. And I couldn't have made it different.
Right. So what finally made you, like, come to peace with everything? Was there a moment or something you realized or something you did that helped you finally kind of, like, not necessarily like close that chapter and forget, but move forward knowing that you were completely at peace with the situation? You were happy about, you know, that you tried, that you were at least there for him. What was it that got you to that point finally?
I'll let you know when I get there.
That's a good point. And I mean, I think honestly, that's probably super realistic, because I mean, that's such a huge thing to deal with. You know, it would take a ton of therapy for me to get through it, a lot of things to process all that and get to a good place with it. And, you know, I think that's something probably that'll go on for the rest of your life, even kind of understanding that and, you know, really accepting it and always being at peace with it.
So, I'm a little woo.
Oh, me too. I'm all about the woo.
So I'm a little woo. And I went to a psychic a few months ago because I could feel his presence. Like, I've always been able to feel it since he passed, but it was super strong. So I actually went to a psychic and did saw a spirit guide and had a conversation like through her. And that really pushed me to the place I am now. Like, if you would have asked me to do this interview like 4 months ago, I don't necessarily know that I could have done it. I think I would have been like, like, I was still so numb to it.
Right.
But, and again, I mean, it's super woo, so it's not.
I know. Can you tell us a little bit about it? I'm super curious now. I want to know what happened.
Yeah. Okay. So, I went and, she asked like what I wanted to talk about. We talked about a bunch of different things, but I told her, I said, I can feel an ex's presence who died. And I didn't tell her how he died or anything like that. And she didn't get how he died. Like, so I immediately was on edge and I was like, this lady is not talking to anybody. Like, this is fucking stupid. I cannot believe I'm sitting here in a psychic trying to talk to my dead ex-boyfriend. Like, I can't believe that. And then she started talking about how she could sense that like he didn't have a good relationship with my dad, which was very true, because after the first time that he went to jail, he called my dad to apologize for hurting me. And my dad said, I think you're a great person. I wish you all the best and all the best luck, but my daughter takes care of people for a living. She doesn't need to come home and do it. And that was the last conversation he ever had with my dad. And that was not even a year into the 3-year trial and tribulation. So she could sense that. And she said that she asked if my dad rode a motorcycle, and she said that Jeff was looking over him every time he rode it because he knew how much I hated it, and like all this crazy stuff.
Wow.
But then she talked about what he's doing in the spirit world, and basically he's like the way that I looked at it was basically like he does intake when you die in the spirit world, and like looks at the spirits and helps them pass over because people get stuck. And his job is to help people fully pass over into their next life. And the whole time I was talking to her, she just kept like rubbing her arm, and then she started rubbing both arms, and she said that the the connection that was going on in the room was the strongest connection she had ever felt, and that she believes the two of us are part of the same spirit family, and that he said that he is waiting for me to pass, so when my spirit passes over, we can make the decision to move on together to the next life. Just like all this crazy, like really crazy.
Girl, I have like chills listening to that.
But
That's like goosebumps.
yeah, basically she said that he just kept reiterating that he wanted me to know that he is fine, that he didn't mean to kill himself, but that where he's at is the best place for him, and he's making a difference for people, and that he knows I stayed longer than anybody else would have, and that he just really wanted me to know that he's doing the work, and that it was important that I was proud of him because I wasn't when he was on earth.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
goosebump chill moment. That's so cool though. I
Yeah.
love that it almost seems like she kind of gave you the peace, you
Yeah.
know, and like the closure that you were looking for by like having him say like, you know, I'm good here. It sounds like you found peace. I didn't mean to do this. Like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's awesome.
It was crazy. Like I sobbed the entire session. Like I was just sobbing because the way that she was saying the things and what he was saying, it did sound like him.
Yeah.
And I mean, even if it is a load of bullshit, it gave me something that I needed. So I'll take it. Like at the end of the day, I'll take it. It made me feel better because I think there was just this part of me that was like, what if he died thinking that I didn't care anymore? And I think that was the hardest part for me.
Mm-hmm. You guys didn't have any like closure before everything happened.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, he died 4 months after the last conversation I had with him. And the last conversation was, I can't have any more conversations with you.
Right.
And I mean, I wasn't mean. I was very positive and said how
Right.
much I cared about him and wanted the best for him, but that I no longer could be part of that. So.
Right. And, you know, I think there's nothing wrong with making that decision. I think it's very strong for a person to make that decision, knowing that, you know, you can't enable it. You can't be a part of it any longer. Like you don't want to be tied to it. And, you know, I think some people don't or have a hard time finding the strength to say those things and put that message apart because they're afraid of what might happen.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm very proud of you for being able to do that and knowing that, you know, it wasn't a bad thing. And it's not like you were doing anything malicious towards him just by trying to better your own life and knowing that you couldn't help him in his. So to really kind of wrap this up, I want you to kind of, for anyone listening that might be going through a similar situation or that might go through something in the future similar to this or run into this kind of situation, what kind of advice would you give someone that either is in the beginning stages of this or smack dab in the middle of it or has been maybe putting up with this for decades in a relationship, a marriage, a family dynamic, a friendship? What kind of advice would you give someone in a situation like that?
Whew, that's a deep question. I want them to know it's not their fault. Like, I think that's the most important thing that they have to know. It is not your fault. You did not cause this addiction. This is something that is, you know, it's something. Addiction is the addict's problem, but it affects everybody around them. And so it's really hard not to take on ownership of that problem. So really figuring out who you are outside of that relationship, I think is very important because you get so consumed with it. I mean, it would be to the point he would go to Meijer and he'd be gone for longer than I thought he should be. And he would like take a picture with his watch next to something in Meijer to show me like that's where he was. Like my whole life was consumed with it. So I think just knowing who you are outside of it, knowing that you can't make somebody change unless they're totally willing. And even if they're willing, they might not be able to. Like I said, especially if it's a hard drug, like all addictions are difficult. I'm not trying to say that there are different, you know, that one addiction is better than the other because it's definitely not. Addiction is addiction. But, you know, you have to be realistic about it. You have to look at statistics. I heard 3 to 10%. And in my head, all I kept thinking was, well, he's definitely part of that 3%. Like, who the hell thinks that? Like, you have to put yourself out of the situation. You have to look into it because when you're in it, you're so deep in it that nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense except for spending all of your time, energy, love on this person to heal them. And that's not your job. Your job is to take care of you first. So if you're in this situation, you know, if you don't see your partner or your friend or your parent or whoever it is getting better, then you have to be able to set up boundaries and make sure that you are staying safe.
Well, this was an amazing conversation. I'm so glad that you came on and did this. I'm so happy we got to talk about this for the show. I think this is going to help so many people, and it's just such a good message, because I think a lot of people are really taboo. They don't want to talk about addiction. They don't want to talk about, you know, something as serious as, you know, loving and losing an addict. And I think that, you know, I've always tried to be very transparent in my podcast episodes and talk about everything and anything. And so I think this is something that absolutely needed to be talked about. And so thank you so much for coming on and doing this today. And Staci is a life coach. She's got a lot of amazing content online. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about where they can find you if they want to connect with you, reach out to you, maybe talk to you about this stuff, or connect with your business online?
For sure. So on Instagram, I'm Successfully Sassy Coaching. I have on Facebook, it's my like / or whatever is Staci Hissong, StaciHissong. And then I have a group on Facebook also called Positively Sassy that has a whole bunch of great content and trainings and all sorts of stuff like that. And my website is successfullysassycoaching.com.
Okay, awesome. And I will have all those links down in the show notes as well. So if you guys want to check out Staci, connect with her. If you guys want to chat with her about this episode and what you heard, I will have everything linked in the show notes on iTunes. So you guys can get in touch with her hella easy. But again, thank you so much, Staci, for coming on today and doing this. And I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation in today's episode.